Good morning. I'm Kiely, president of the Ad Club, and welcome back to the Big Orange Couch. I have two very interesting people with me that I'm actually going to refer to as the dynamic duo, because when you spend any time with them and you hear about what they're doing, you will agree with me, they're very dynamic. So today on the Big Orange Couch, we have Derek Cascio and Sam Aquillano, and they are co-founders of what I have to carefully call the Design Museum of Boston. Do not call it the Boston Design Museum. The Design Museum of Boston. So welcome to the Big Orange Couch today, and thank you for being here.
It's a very comfortable couch.
It is very comfortable.
Let's talk a little bit about the Design Museum. Some people would think that it's a physical place, and it's not, which I thought for a long time that there was actually a physical place.
We call it a museum on purpose because I think the word museum kind of denotes that physicality and that place where you go to learn, like experiential learning. But really, we don't have an actual space, and that's for a lot of reasons. When we started the museum, we wanted to have a building, you know, because it's like make a museum, get a building, have exhibits, right? But it was right around 2008, 2009 with the recession, and you know, running a capital campaign at that time just wasn't realistic. Sure. But we have really hard heads, and we really wanted to do this. And so we came up with this idea of a virtual museum, or sometimes we call it nomadic museum, where basically we put exhibits in places where people already go.
The pop-up retail model was an inspiration for us, at least when we first started thinking about how are we going to do this if we can't have a full building. Retail stores, empty retail store space was really the first place that we looked.
But it's interesting, though, that you still have a foot in the corporate world, because let's talk a little bit about what the goal of the museum is. And obviously one piece of it is just by the virtue of that you're putting it at the airport and you're putting it at the government center. One piece of it is to bring great design to the public eye.
Actually, that's a good point. We try to draw the connection between design and just planning. Everyone plans. Design is planning in a visual way. So our main goal is to educate people about design and how its role in their lives from a very, I always mention the toothbrush because it's like something that's so taken for granted, but there are literally teams of people designing that toothbrush. And teams of people designing your building. So there's that talk, and then there's also the talk about the fact that so much of it's happening right in their backyard here in Boston. There's so much design in Boston, and that's one of the main reasons we started the museum, was that there's so much design, architecture, graphic design, advertising happening in Boston and greater Boston, but the public just doesn't really have a window into that industry at all, whereas I think the public and the culture in Boston is much more around like fine arts and financial services and academia and medical. But the design industry is huge, and it impacts all those different industries. So it's to kind of bring that into the light of day, and I think finally is to have people ultimately demand better design from us as designers, right?
Where do you feel design is right now in the city of Boston, and what do you think is the future of it?
I think the big thing, and I know Derek always talks about, is that kind of the barriers and the different silos of design are kind of breaking. So I think you see like firms like IDEO and Continuum doing much more than what they started out to do. IDEO started as a product design firm. Now they do strategy, they do advertising, they do all types of different work.
And I think that is definitely something that you're seeing across the board. Smaller firms or the folks that you don't hear about, there's a lot of people doing this stuff out there right now, and it's all good work. Essential 11, those guys started off as typical product design firms, and they're expanding.
Now I want to be sure that we cover off on this show that's coming up, because I think you've done something very impressive.
So this is will be our next major exhibition following the City Hall show, Creative Capital, and it's called Beyond the Logo. And it's an exhibition on branding design. But more than just kind of when people think about brands, I think when the public thinks about brands, they think about that logo, that one mark that is kind of like the Nike swoosh, like that is branding. When really there are so many other activities that go into establishing a brand in our heads, and we really think, and we talk about sort of in the early materials we're putting together, that brands only exist, you know, right between my hands here, right in our heads, and so all those activities are sort of aimed to like cultivate that image in your brain.
So people who want to get involved with you, at the end of this, we'll have some kind of a call to action up.
Yeah, absolutely.
What would you suggest people do? I'm sure there's all different levels to get involved.
We're always looking for volunteers, because we have a lot of different, and I mean, you're looking at the staff. But we also, behind Derek and I, have about 30 volunteers that help us from filming events to working the door to helping us install exhibitions. So if there's any interest in volunteering, then that's a big one. And then, as always, I mean, if there are companies out there who are looking to kind of reach out to this type of audience, the creative audience, and who want to kind of make an impact, and we're always looking for support in that way as well.
Excellent.
So we don't turn those away. Yeah, and just to double back a little bit about engaging youth in this kind of stuff, we run a program called Studio, and that program is actually what was the end result of that program. Our first program over at Wentworth was the retail exhibit that was up at the Prudential.
Oh, fabulous!
Yeah.
And so we are open to doing that with
other schools
and high schools, and I think that's something that we can do our part to try and bring some of that experience to programs that aren't funded as well, or potentially don't have the ability to make an entire art.
Yeah, because during that program, these students designed the entire exhibition, funded it, came up with the idea, fabricated it, installed it. They did everything.
Well,
we just gave them a platform to do it, and so they got to learn all about design, but then also all about
program
entrepreneurship and funding.
That's fabulous.
So it was a great program. We're going to keep doing it.
Well, Derek, Sam, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
And thank you to all of you for joining us once again on the Big Orange Couch.